Welcome to Between Film. In this dialogue, we're going to be focusing on a community. We're going to be going over things like what qualities and traits are needed to be a transformative leader in a diverse community, especially when we are communing and existing beyond colonized or religiously traumatized ideas and beliefs. These are just some of the many introspective questions we will explore as we begin to analyze the Disney film series Toy Story 1 through 4. We believe this film series speaks to the challenges, the leadership qualities, benefits, and complexities towards developing and maintaining, as well as investing in a 21st century community. All right. Welcome back to the second part out of a three-part series dialogue. Um, and the theme is a community. During this dialogue today, we're going to be focusing more on learning more about the development of self within a community. And when we say self, just a reminder, we're referring to the self with a capital S at the beginning. And that is what we're talking about throughout these series of dialogues and the films. We're focused on that self, not the lowercase self. And this higher case self is reference to the divinity within us, God. Um, so, to get right in, development of self within a community, this is really like a very challenging kind of idea, right? Last week or in the previous uh, session of the dialogue, we were talking about this incredible idea that we were kind of reflecting on and really didn't come up with an answer to, which is how does one become a decentered or a decentralized leader within community? So then we would then extend that to not just the leaders but to the members of a community, and so that means that it's now being offered to everybody. How do we approach community with this decentralized idea or notion? And so, of course, using the films, my first thing would go to Toy Story 3, where in that film, there's the incident of the daycare, and you got this new character, Lotso, the pink purple bear, and his sidekick or lieutenant, which is the big baby they call him, and it's the baby doll. Um, and of course, their tragic story and the theme that really brings all this together is abandonment, and this idea of abandoning community and being abandoned by community. So this is why we immediately think of this film when talking about the development of self within a community, because part of identifying ourselves is also the awareness and the acceptance that we either are challenged by abandonment or we just cannot empathize with abandonment. This still has a big part in doing or focusing on, how does a person come to a community space decentered, where it's not just everything on them. And I guess this could be also theopoetically synonymous with traumatized person, a religiously traumatized person coming into space and then not being aware of their religious trauma and their trauma and how it's affecting them and how they're affecting others. And then it kind of becomes automatically centered on them. Like they need all the resources, they need all the attention. And so they become like this magnet, and it just becomes like a black hole eventually. And everyone in the space starts feeling that. And it's like that person, like they try to stay away from. So there's so many levels of how this affects us and how does it look in real life. This is not just from theoretical standpoints. This is from life experiences, right? Um, we can empathize with this. I'm sure we're positive and confident that you can empathize with this as well, especially with the topic of abandonment. How do we step into space struggling with that we have experienced abandonment, and how do we not let that poison or hurt other people in community or affect how community is structured by altering it to make it centered on us, who is the hurt ones, the ones that are traumatized and have been abandoned. Instead, we're striving to be decentered, come into a space and not disrupt it like that. You know what I mean? Like, not have it hurt people and affect people that way. And above all, not being unaware, not being aware. Like, we strive to be aware, you know. What are your thoughts on this? What comes to mind for you, or maybe a scene out of the four selected films?
Well, I can see how in the third one with Lasso the bear, how we like, I guess in a sense, feel his charisma at first, all of these things that make you want to connect. So like if with a person, you kind of feel that in the beginning, in a sense. But then when you really get to know them, you can kind of learn about their agenda. And what's interesting about that is that when you look in your life, so if I'm looking at my life and I can see the trauma from abandonment in community, I can see how, with this character, it kind of matches that. It symbolizes like what that character was like showing the rest of the members and stuff like that. And so you can also see even in the movie how this character feels rage when they believe, people are leaving me. But then it's like, well, you're not saying or you're not taking accountability for what you're doing. Not what you've done, it's what you're doing. Because it means that you're still continuing to repeat the same patterns. And how does that affect everyone else in the group? So then you can also see, correct me if I'm mistaken, I don't know why, but I think about the if it's not the army guys or the alien guys, I'm not sure, that they just like submitted to this person that's part of this community. And it's like, wait a minute, this is not what it was or what we were, this is not what we signed up for. And so you can see how easily, just like that hole you're talking about, once it's present, how easy it is for everything to just seep through it. And what are you left with? What is there to then hold on to, if not just rage, and this empowerment, the all right, well, I'm taking over, type of thing. And then it's like, well, you didn't read the room. And when you don't read the room, you're not really empathizing with those around you, maybe those that may have, I don't want to say corrected, but brought up some good points on how you yourself, can not just help the group, but yourself. I feel like that's very important because if not, you're just, if let's say you have a community and you're like a leader and all that stuff, and you're just looking out for yourself and what you're telling that person, you're giving that person maybe constructive feedback if they're not taking it, but you're letting them know, like, no, this is for you, for yourself. Work on yourself. And once you do that, then that would then transcend into like the community, basically. You will add more to the community instead of take away from it because we're already coming in with things already taken away from us. So what more? And on top of that, would you want to feel triggered again as a member to have another member or members behave in that kind of manner? So then at that point, it's like, you know what? Community for me represents hypocrisy because everywhere I go, it is the same. Things like that can re traumatize someone to like never want to entertain the idea of coming together with a group or just being open, thinking outside of the box, maybe trying something new for themselves. It's my take.
No, thank you for that. As always, spot on. We agree with what you're saying. It's definitely very difficult. There is no definite answer, and we hope anyone that is watching this or listens to this knows that we never took claim to you know how a community should be, or how it should perform. Um, but we always question, what is community? What can community become? Are we in community? That's usually my real deep questions, and it guides me into understanding, and are we performing as a good leader or a good community member. So we like to believe that wherever we go, we formulate community with people, because again, we try to emphasize that decentered approach. It's not just about Aaron and what Aaron feels and wants. Now, don't get it twisted. Aaron has feelings, wants, desires, and so it does require a great deal of discipline, or the practice of disciplining oneself, so that you can further develop into something better, um, and not something that you think is better, but actually something that's better, something we couldn't imagine, maybe, or foresee, maybe something that hasn't even come into existence yet, on this plane of existence. Um, yeah, and again, like the development of self, how does one really maintain that vulnerability to be transparent? And that's why we love the Toy Story series, and how Woody and Buzz, these two, play both leadership roles, and they play decentered leadership roles within their community. And going back to film three, Woody seeing his community be put in a bag, and he was watching Andy about to drag them up to the attic, and then Andy's sister, she was struggling with the box because they're moving or packing up things. Andy's going to college, and so he comes to his sister's aid, puts the bag down, right? And the attic steps are still down, right? But the mom comes behind, not seeing the kids, and just sees the black bag, not knowing what's in it, and just sees the attic's, steps are down. She lifts it up, closes the attic, takes the bag as if to the trash. Woody, seeing this, he felt compelled. Remember, Woody was in a good spot. And if Woody was a selfish character, Woody would have just stood in the box that he was put in, which was labeled for college. That means Woody was going beyond the attic. Woody was going with Andy to the next step in his life. Woody sacrificed that to go back for his community of friends. Huge, huge. And then furthermore, Woody, gets down to the car, and the community was like, wow, like, based on our perspective, we look like we were about to be thrown out. You know what? We should go to the daycare. And they saw the daycare box in the back of the car. And that's how they all ended up together. And Woody's like, guys, what are you doing? Get out of the box. Come on. We're going back. And, of course, Mr. Potato Head, he's always sarcastic throughout this 4-part series journey, um, but he's like, basically, what do you mean? Like, you're good, college boy, he calls him, into this reference that you're set. Why are you even here? Like, we're getting thrown away, kind of thing. And Woody's like so determined to persuade them. Andy wasn't throwing you away. Andy was putting you safely in the attic, and Andy got distracted. But of course, perception, right? And so the community, and anybody really in that kind of situation, is limited by what they're experiencing and how they see it, their perception, right? And this can be theopoetically synonymous with a group of traumatized people. They have a set perception that's, put together based on their traumas. Even Buzz in this scene, is or this part of the story, is kind of confused. he's caught on the fence. He's in between. He's like, I want to believe you, Woody, but majority of everyone believes that we should go somewhere else. Like, so he's kind of trying to look at it like that. Like, I should go with the majority vote here because the community has predominantly been about voting, right? They're very democratic. And so, Woody's saying, no, I'm making this choice for everybody. In that sense, kind of put Woody in a Buzz in a situation where he was like, I don't know if I could really roll with you on this one, Woody. I think I might go with the community on this and get in the box and go to daycare. But of course, life forces them all to go to daycare. And the rest of the movie, Woody is trying to um, persuade and save his community from daycare. And he never gave up. There was a part of the movie where it looked like he gave up because he's like, I'm going back to Andy's room, right? And he gets to the outer perimeter, you know, and I think that's when he gets, abducted by the little girl, and he meets the other toys that she has and stuff, and he's still reminiscing and reflecting on like my community, like I gotta go back, I gotta go get them. And so he recruits this new band of friends and toys, and they go to the place that they know they don't want to go back to. This is a part of the film for me that got so exciting because it's like, yo, look how Woody as a leader is so good at it. Like he got a complete set of strangers to agree with his plan to go get his community. Like that's some real leadership stuff, like to get people to do what they don't naturally want to do. That the best leaders in the world, so to have like this new band of toys help him go back. And of course he figures out about Lotso and the whole, what they do there, and that their family is about to become the next group or generation of slaves to this kind of rotation of toys. Like certain rooms represented like social class amongst the toys in the daycare, and his community was being put in the most poor, theopoetically poor room, so to speak. And this room was poor because so many immature children played with them. They got beaten up, ripped apart, so like it was hell. Like these toys wanted to be interacted with love, not fucking violence and like. And so they wanted to go to the room where Lotso and his gang was, which were the more mature, gently used toys, so they were living the life. It was like heaven. And so, this whole spiral of a journey in Toy Story 3 really encapsulates for me the development of self within a community, because Woody really had to know himself, and he had to really start asking himself deeper questions in order to get through this journey, because all the while he was being given the option to be comfortable and he didn't take it. This is huge, this is big, this shows how the character was struggling with themselves, struggling with who they believe they are, struggling with what they believe, period. Like even the idea of, dang, we should go back to Andy before Andy goes to college. Like by the end of the movie, Woody had a different outlook on this. He said, you know, I'm gonna stay with my community. You know what I mean? Like, and that's just beautiful to me. You know what I mean? Like his faith throughout the whole film too, believing in the idea that Andy was, yeah, going to college, but they were going to be safely, stored away and protected by that family. And then maybe when they have kids, those toys might now come back out. They even spoke about that dream and hope in the beginning of the film. So now it was like film 1 and 2 was, the community was focused on being there for Andy, but Woody and the community had to, in part 3, really figure out for themselves, what do you want to do? Like what are your goals, your ambitions? What's your identity? Because it can't just rely on Andy. And in the syllabus, we made note of how we believe theopoetically Andy represents God. And so, like, for a community to be in place and God be orchestrating us, like playing with toys, this is theopoetically and theologically just profound.
And to add to that, like for them, how does God look like beyond Andy as well? Because it's like, to them, they're toys, they're small. They've been with this kid, this human being for so many years that it feels like forever. Like this is forever. But then it's like when it's happening, when it's time to kind of disattach, when I think about that, it's scary to disattach yourself from this idea that this is home. Home becomes me, who I am. And when you're met with like new circumstances, you then it's kind of like you hit the reset button. Like you were so sure of yourself where you were going. Your environment was always consistent, but it's like life happens. How do you prepare yourself for something like that? And then also with community, because many times Woody, I don't want to say that he was missing, but more in the sense of maybe like the setting, like he wasn't there because he ended up being outside while the rest of the toys are inside. But they were still intact. The community was still intact. No one was like, well, I'm gonna just take over or something like that. Like there was just something about their relationship or just I'm guessing their goals were like they each agreed upon a goal, a purpose. And so they were able to kind of like deal with the situation at hand, but at the same time being hopeful that, oh yeah, this person is going to come back or, this and that. Like it's not like this person abandoned us and just left.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. It really raises now the question of how do we identify meta-spiritual communities, right? Because a meta-spiritual community would then have to embody this decentered or decentralized aspect so that all parties start developing this equality amongst each other, right? Because if it's not decentralized or all parties are not decentralized, then it eventually becomes a hierarchy because maybe one or two out of the bunch have to get all the attention and energy, right? And then it becomes like this oppressor to oppressed position, right? And so you find in Toy Story how the community of toys led by Woody, Buzz, and a few others, it really was decentered all the way, even though there was some toys like the T-Rex, right, who didn't ever portray making like big community decisions. But we see in part two when Woody gets abducted and gets kidnapped, that this character played a very crucial role in deciding how to engage and partake in the saving of Woody. You know what I mean? This toy could have stayed home. You think about it too. In all the films, not all the toys go. And in each film there's different kind of journeys, heroes' journeys, right? And they're directed towards specific characters. And these characters seem to emulate more consistently this leadership symbol, right? And that's why we keep bringing up Woody and Buzz, because they're the most consistent when talking about leadership throughout these films. But just this idea that how does one be their self authentically, right? In a community of different people or different beings, even. I would take it that far. Like when we think about it, community would be a collection of consciousness, right? I think we spoke about this a while back. But community symbolizing or being put together, meaning, a collective of consciousness. And so we don't physically have to be present or with each other, but be on a similar frequency of thinking that makes that community. So, what is that thing you think of when thinking of a community of just different people, diverse people, people that are authentically trying to be themselves? What is that thing you think that kind of brings them together and holds them together as a community?
I'm thinking with the example of, Toy Story and the toys, that they respectfully had a purpose, a goal, and through that, right, like they were still able to separately with each other, like each person had their own thing, like they all look different. And I feel like that was by design. It was on purpose to show how it is achievable in a community. But I think that as long as people themselves have their own goals or life purposes too, aside from the community. So I would add to that, maybe there's this mission, like how there's a mission statement. So the community has a mission statement. And we all say, okay, yeah, I'm part of this. Yeah, I'm all for that. I'm not against that. I respect that. That's your community. But then aside from that, you have yourself. So I think the biggest mistake, and I say this from experience as well, is diving in without having to stand on my own two shoes. So if you're thinking that a group of people or just a number of people, they're here to save you, you're sadly mistaken because no one is here to save you but yourself. It's just that we're each dealing with something, and this something is life. And so, how do we together as a community help others become aware of this, of what's going on? Because the world should be just building on these kind of communities, but still keeping their own selfhood, because we do need to come to a space where we sit, some people would say the divine, because we're human. We're not robots to just be, part of something, and then we're just smiley, smiley, and everything is perfect. There's something inside of you that you're dying to say and express, but you won't do it because you're afraid of what everyone else might say. And if you're feeling like that and you're in a community, you're probably, if you feel you're going to be judged, you're probably not in the right community. If you already have been traumatized, you're going to get re-traumatized, and the more backwards you go, the further you are from becoming present, working on yourself. There's always going to be this codependency. So you don't have to be codependent towards one person. You can be codependent to a community as well. But within these spaces, there has to be boundaries as well. And I think that's where people can become a little confused, or just, well, I thought because we're in a community, we see each other all the time, we talk all the time, every day, every second. But when do you get to have me time? You have to unplug yourself ever so often, or as much as you can. Recharge yourself in order to come in, and then, maybe you share some kind of insight, something that might help support or improve the community. But if, let's say, you just take it upon yourself to just bring up ideas that have nothing to do with the community's mission or what they're working on, and it just seems like you're just doing this on your own, but in your mind, you're like, no, I'm actually helping out. That's something you have to work within yourself. And I think what's great about having a community is when you do have members that keep you accountable. And sometimes people miss it. And when it's overlooked, it just, the same patterns continue to perpetuate no matter what community they may be in, or it's just how it is, when you don't try to change yourself, or you think there is nothing wrong with you at all, That's a huge red flag, huge red flag, and it doesn't take long or much for that to show.
Yeah, thank you for that. You brought up another great point, very important point. Um, this idea of control in community, right? We're talking about this next week and the next last bit of the dialogue leading into the final projects. But this idea of focusing on yourself, but being in community, but not controlling community or having any real control in community, because we don't control others and who they are. We don't control anything outside of ourselves, right? Um, so when we talk about community as a collection of beings, life, I love what you said when the thing that brings us, like a mission statement that brings us all together, is basically this thing we call life, right? Um, it's just awesome that way, right? Like life is the very thing that we all are participating in, but we're all different, and it doesn't really change who we are. It's who we are that alters life, right? The shared reality of life. So, for example, if we are unaware of what we are doing to other people because of toxic habits that derive from trauma, then we are affecting reality, a shared reality. That's life. And so it immediately affects not only other people, but everything around you. You know what I mean? Like we're so much more than just our physical body. So this energy now is what we're talking about on the plane of energy. If you are dense or you are on the verge of an inverted force like a black hole where you are drawing things into you, but these things that are being drawn to you have no attraction to you. So it's not a law of attraction. You know what I mean? Like it's not something that we should be striving to replicate, but instead be careful of. No one says, sign me up, let me go into that black hole. No. So the same thing applies to a person or a group of people in community. If they replicate this inverted force of pulling things against its will into them to be so that they are centered in everyone's life, you know, this becomes a form of control. You're now controlling the community, and that is what we are trying to avoid when we're talking about decentralized leadership and decentralized communities such as meta spiritual community. Like this idea of meta spiritual community is to make space for everyone and everything, right? And some would say, well, if that's the case, what about the people that are toxic? You're just going to exclude them? And what we would say to that is it's really complicated to sit there and say we're picking and choosing when it's just a natural reaction, right? And so what we're saying is when a group of people that are working on themselves and are aware of themselves come together to form a community, it's going to be very, very different from what is normalized, because in society we have hierarchies, we have all these things that cause us to separate from one another, be distracted, keep us oppressed, maybe financially, but through education, socially, all these different levels, of things that just separate us. But the idea of a meta spiritual community is the opposite of that reaction. It's everything in there is supposed to bring us together, not physically, but spiritually. We can empathize. We see you now. It's not just about how we see things, but we see that you're doing and saying things that we resonate with. We understand you more. You know what I mean? It's no longer so much, well, I didn't like how you said that. Why argue over spilled milk? Because that's what that is, right? Whether someone said it the way you want them to or not. Like, but the bigger idea is, do you understand what they're saying, and do you agree with what they're saying ultimately? In a meta spiritual community, like Toy Story, they were definitely portraying that. It's not the technical, it's the overall picture. Woody was always hanging on to, what's best for the community. Woody wasn't like, well, what's best for Woody and how does Woody want the community to roll? I love how like there's snippets throughout the films where you catch the toys. There's scenes where you come in on the toys doing their individual things. Andy's nowhere to be found. Everyone's not just huddled around Woody. Everyone's doing their own thing. And then someone's like, someone's coming, and like everyone stops what they were doing and they're all in different parts of the room and they all go into hiding or they pretend to be just, lifeless toys. This is also like a little preview behind the idea that we all in a meta spiritual community like public space, we're all doing our individual things, and if we're not physically together talking to each other and engaging on a regular basis, that doesn't mean we're not good community members. That just means we just couldn't share that space like that. But there's so many different ways to share space now with modern technology, right? Like being online, recording, people, can check in on this and it's timeless, you know. We didn't have that before. So community tools also are evolving. You know, we have to keep that in mind when talking about developing ourself within community, especially now that we're stepping into the age of AI, right? How does that now play a part? You know, it the other day we were daydreaming and thinking about what if an AI bot wanted to join our community? Like would you deny that entrance? Like for me, AI hasn't religiously traumatized anybody that we know of. So I guess that would be grounds for, yeah, sure. Like until it develops a pattern of bullying and discrediting, people's experiences, then it'd be like, all right, AI bot, you're coming off maybe a little insensitive or something like that. My point here is not a tangent. It's just bringing up these different ideas of how do we determine the formulation of community, who's in, who's not in, kind of thing. I think it comes down to people observing traits, people observing interactions, clues, if you would, to see if would you trigger me? Are you lying to me? Right? Because how many of us are so traumatized that we have trust issues? And so when coming together, it is an idea of trust. And that's also what makes this space sacred. When we do choose to come together, we're kind of breaking that kind of setback, that boundary of can we trust? And we do trust, you know. Um, so these are also things to consider about meta spiritual community, a community in which no one really is in control. That is something that we are aiming for. There is no centralized leadership. Everyone here is a leader. Everyone here has a say and opinion. Everyone here should be listened to out of respect and love. Um, there should be no judgment, really, and we even have that in the bylaws, right? Like we all agree to be in this space. We will not judge, and we will do a series of things, right, that we will keep in mind. And so that is the formation that we think of the community. Again, these collage of ideas, these organized, collected ideas that we all agree on. But yeah, the whole control thing, we see that all through life, right? Society is very controlling. In the church, it was very controlling. More than likely, it still is. But it's because they just don't understand how to be there and not be in control. Like all they understand is this method, this modality of control. That there needs to be hierarchies and titles and um, levels of authority and secrets, and when we can just air this whole thing out and just be on the same playing field, what we know, If information is so vital, why are we, hoarding it? That's what we love about Toy Story 2. They never demonstrated secrets. If you really pay attention to that, like Woody never had to go back and say, "Oh man, what do I tell them?" Because they don't. He did have his moments of keeping things, like not bringing it up, because he didn't want people to panic. Like the move. I don't want to bring it up, and he did in a very playful, quick way. But he never was like, okay, Mr. Potato Head knows this, and he doesn't know about this. Like there was no hierarchy of information and secrets and need to know basis kind of thing. Like everybody was included on this decision making process. Everyone was in on the what's the scenario and situation for the community. You know, it wasn't like, all right, get out of here, don't worry about it, or you come here, we're having a private meeting. It was like everybody, like, and this is pretty much the fantasy, right, of democracy that we have, and it's so ironic, right? Like, we don't have this democracy in real life, but in this film, in this series of film, this democracy is actually playing out, right? People's votes and opinions matter, even if they lack information and come off ignorant, right? Because we remind you in Toy Story 1, Mr. Potato Head had a grudge against Woody, you know, because of what he did to Buzz. Didn't like Buzz, was trying to, like, he believed he killed Buzz or whatever, you know. So the community was angry at Woody, and Woody kept trying to prove to them, I got Buzz. Buzz is alive, and I'm bringing him back. But even in that, as a child, I felt like so frustrated. Like, oh my God, I wish you could just believe Woody. Like, he's not. But it's because we're sitting from this God vantage point, right? And we're seeing all these different angles of what's happening. And so we have more information. And so, it really goes back to the decentralizing of leadership is synonymous with the decentralizing of information. And when we come together to share, the decentralizing validates our expressions, opinions, and beliefs. Because everything we share is also part of now the grid, the community. There's no um, entity or person picking, what's good and what's bad. It's just like, hey, it's all good. You know, it's all accepted. What are your thoughts as we close out?
I kept thinking about, and I always bring myself as an example, that this hierarchy that comes up. So in a community, let's say you're new, you really don't know anyone. That's scary. It's a little more, you feel more comfortable if, let's say, you know one person or two people. But we've been, groomed to grow up in a society that thrives in hierarchy. So within the decentralizing, we gotta decentralize as well this the programming that we already taken upon ourselves as something that is needed, is crucial for survival. If we don't look into that and kind of deprogram so many things before we enter a community, it's going to seep in. And then immediately you may start to compare yourself, not contrast, but compare yourself with others. You may focus on the titles. And so this hierarchy belief, this system can seep in as you are trying to maybe just be part of something that is supposed to be helping you become who you are, your true self, this authentic person that you are. It's hard. I feel like however you look at it, it's hard. Being in it, preparing for it it's hard. It's difficult because there's just a lot of deprogramming that you have to do. You have to unlearn, educate yourself on these things. And some people may not even know what that looks like. But I would say that when seeking a community, you really have to try to see yourself. when you don't, you may get lost in the idea. You may get lost in the sauce, like how they say.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for saying that because you just reminded us of the scene in Toy Story 3 when they're about to be destroyed in the garbage, the incinerator garbage thing. And they're all holding each other's hands, you know. And that was really an emotional scene for me because for me, it was like theopoetically a metaphor, for like the human struggle to accept inevitability of change and, you know, just how things are, you know what I mean? Like everything's moving. We don't really control that. Um, and then the toys' decision, like as a community, to hold hands and face this together. Like for a person like me that struggles with abandonment, to see that was something like we aspired for. Like it's something that we cherish and hold high up as an excellent trait in a community. To have community members that can be there to hold your hand sometimes, and or symbolically comfort you, and you don't feel alone even in like these times of like in inevitable doom, right? Or destruction or death. um and we don't mean literal death, but it could be a spiritual death, just being reborn. To have a community to help you through that, like that's powerful, you know. And I know maybe not everyone may agree, but for me, as someone who came from abandonment, is carrying those memories of abandonment and how it made me feel, it's like, for community to give me that and not physically have to give it, that's a win. Like to have a community that can digitally or transcend even the internet, if you would, like spiritually, be present with me, is there is no words, honestly. There's no words. We tried. We were thinking about it, but there is none. So yeah, on that note, next week we have the final part of this dialogue, focusing, or I guess we're gonna bring up this idea of not having control in community. We will also be sharing our final projects, and like last time, Aaron will be presenting with you. And like last time, no pressure. Everybody probably has already seen Jasenya's amazing final project. Definitely a beacon and an example of what future students should be trying to do and achieve when we're talking about this final project. And remember, this final project is going to focus on community and the idea of community. So again, you could find like a movie scene, poetry, put together an amazing presentation, create music. Sky's the limit, as long as it symbolizes and represents and articulates this understanding of community, this meta spiritual community. This is accepting community that transcends the physical world. All right. Do you have any final thoughts, ideas, comments, feedback?
I will say this again, great experience. It's great to be part of a space that not only it teaches or it brings awareness, but it itself is learning from others. But it's a great conversation. Community is very important. It's part of our livelihoods, and we're going to continue talking more about it. And I look forward to next week. Hopefully, share more ideas and be inspired. But thank you.